In April of 2026, the American College of Sports Medicine put out, I would say, probably the most comprehensive, I would say, research that has been done on resistance training. They systematically reviewed 137 studies, um, and that covered about 30,000 participants. So pretty substantive. And, the American College of Sports Medicine, they're probably the most authoritative body in exercise science. So it's reputable. About a dozen researchers, I believe 8 or 9 institutions, across 4 countries. So really large study. The lead author, Dr. Stuart Phillips, who we've talked a little bit about with protein and in some of his research there. And I believe that was blog post 9. This is sort of landmark research. And the conclusion will permanently, I would say, simplify how you think about strength training as you approach 50 and beyond. The most important conclusion I would say that Dr. Phillips, really came to, and the position of the American College of Sports Medicine about training is this. He actually put it directly with the best resistance training program, the best one out there, is the one you actually stick with. Consistency, and we've discussed that. Training all your major muscle groups at least twice a week. Then that's all that matters. You don't need to chase this idea of the perfect or complex training plan. Okay, and that's after reviewing 137, systematically reviewing 137 studies. So these are not advanced competitive athletes, right? It's people like me and you. Almost any form of resistance training beats no resistance training, obviously. Showing up consistently beats optimizing any single training variable, right? Showing up consistently. We've emphasized that multiple times here on the channel. And this is not a message of like lowered expectations. It's really sort of in some aspects, liberating. It means you don't have to have the perfect program. You don't need to decode some complex plan that someone puts out there. You do not need any specific fancy exercise equipment out there. You need to train all your major muscle groups at least twice a week. That's it. And it's got to be sufficient challenge and progressive, right? We've talked about progressive overload and the importance of that. And you need to keep doing it for years, okay? You need to, we've talked about the UCAN system. There's tools in there to make sure we're consistent, all right? That's important, consistency. And let's review sort of I would say, six variables that genuinely matter when building strength and muscle, at age 50 and beyond. Heavier loads at 80% of that 1 rep maximum. So that shows clear a dose response relationship. So that's important. For muscle size, any load between 30 and 100% for 1 rep max, works volume if the effort is adequate, right? Effort matters here. Volume, at least 2 to 3 sets per exercise per session. For that maximum hypertrophy that you're looking for, 10 or more sets per muscle group per week is what you're looking at. All right. And frequency, as we said, 2 sessions per week. That's adequate. And you want full range of motion. That's important, right? So full range of motion will outperform any partial movements. And, and again, emphasizing that progressive overload as you go through. Now, not that surprising, or I should say that now the surprising part is most adults over the age of 50 worry about, what they worry about that do not consistently affect outcomes, as shown in these 137 studies, is training to failure, right? There is no need to train to failure. Pushing every set to where you can't do one more rep produces no better strength or hypertrophy um, than stopping at that 2 to 3 reps short. Okay, so you don't have to train to failure. The American College of Sports Medicine specifically said failure training is sort of inadvisable for older adults due to vascular or other type of injury risk. So you don't have to train to failure. They have a concept called periodization. Periodization is really complex variations that you will see pushed by some systems coaches out there, and they sell them as essential, that you got to have these complex variation systems in order to get the muscle growth. And that's just not true, or the research did not support that at all. Time under tension. You hear a lot of talk about that. Time under tension. Counting seconds on every rep, produced no consistent difference. Equipment type, no consistent difference. Free weights are just as good as that machine in the corner. Um, Set structure, these fancy terms out there: drop set, cluster set, complex sets. Didn't really outperform anything than just a straight set of a given exercise. Morning versus evening, no meaningful difference in outcome. So all that sort of taken, sum it all up, that's actually pretty liberating to sort of see the research there. You could stop worrying about what most, I would say, fitness content obsesses about, right? So you don't need to worry about that. Focus on 6 things that matter, and ignore those others that don't. We did publish in blog post 7, I believe it was at Mayo Clinic in 2025, finding that muscle power predicted longevity nearly 6 times more powerfully than muscle strength, right? So that muscle power training versus strength training, so if you look at in your research this study that came out from that we're discussing today with the ACSM put out their position, that power training that's defined as sort of intentionally performing the concentric phase, right? So let's assume you're pushing, we'll say pushing that concentric phase each lift at maximal, and they call it volutional. It's just basically let's just say putting that eccentric motion at full speed, improved in physical function. So, walking performance and short physical, we'll say battery scores, were better when you practiced that. So that's just power training findings, and we go more in that blog post 7. So if you want, that's just much more in depth there in blog post 7 on power training. And with respect to, I would say, beyond training variables that this position stands at the American College of Sports Medicine put out. And they cite, several studies, obviously, out of the 137. But, one of the things they basically state that, is important is, maximum benefit occurred at approximately 30 to 60 minutes per week. So 2 sessions, 20 to 30 minutes, puts you in the maximum, benefit range. So that strength training and how long you need to do it, it's said several times a week, all major muscle groups, and we'll say 60 to 90 minutes. So it's really not a significant amount of time, right? It's consistency. There is I'll call it a 6 exercise program that we'll be putting out later. I'm not going to go through that now, but it's pretty simplistic. We'll put some videos together to help folks get there, and know that that way, if you don't have a program and you're interested in strength training, It'll be a little program we'll be putting out later. Um, and I guess we're going to close with a finding that matters, I would say most, and it's not a training variable. This was, we'll call it participation rate for that demographic of older Americans. And they found only, looking at, Americans, only 15% of the adults, and they had gone up to age 65, meet federal muscle strength guidelines. That means 85% of the older adults are not getting any of the mortality, depression, sleep, power, or functional benefits. And that's for the reason this website, this channel, this is sort of created to get out to that 85%. What they're missing, because it's not going to be from the medical profession. We discussed that before. They're not going to put out anything on getting you stronger as you age. They'll medicate you as you age, but they're not going to put anything out to necessarily make you stronger. So that's pretty, I'd say, startling. A large percentage of the population is not getting there yet. So, our goal is, if you're watching this and an older adult who's not doing any strength training, they're not going to be able to outwalk this. Get them involved in strength training. Get them to the channel. Get them to the website, gettingolderandStronger.com. There's information there, and let's get them going and building some strength. One of the, I would say, things that came out too that would, remove, really remove any excuses, because any form of resistance training works. Okay, that 2 sessions, per week is the threshold. Um, and it's just the equipment type doesn't matter. So all that, I would say, fear of that type of stuff, training to failure doesn't matter, should remove the fear and allow people to start getting going in strength training. The blog post 11 is what this study has all the information. All right, this is just spending 10 or so minutes sort of going on a very high level overview. Get to the website, review the blog post 11 and the research. All the sources are there. This is not my opinion, right? A lot of this is all researched. There's also, if our system, the UCAN personal system, that's there at the website to download. That's all free. You can join the Getting an Older and Stronger community. We have a community over on Facebook. All those links are in the description. So hopefully you found this somewhat informative, but go get more information. If you're already strength training, fantastic. Hopefully you got something out of this. If you're not, reach out to somebody, get them strength training. So make sure we're getting older and stronger as a community. Subscribe to the channel. There'll be more research coming out. Actually, another one coming out here shortly on a study I found in Norway that is fascinating, because it actually says, even for our strength training guidelines, we probably could be even lifting heavier than we are. So great research coming. Subscribe, and I'll get that to you probably next week.